ready for our keynote presentation with these awesome presenters. I'm going to introduce just one, and then she's going to introduce the rest. This is where it's very special. I would like to welcome, please, Rogéair, Purnell, MSW, PhD. Please come and join us and introduce your team. Thank
you. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? All right, awesome. I'm very excited to be here with you. And I'm joined by Dr. Sunny Greene and Maeve Katherine Bergman, two good friends of mine that are regional coordinators in the Bay Area. And how long we've known each other?
Oh, gosh.
A long time. We met when I was director of Gateway to College at Laney over 10 years ago. So I'm happy to be back. I feel like I'm home, so thank you for having us. I'm going to turn it over first to Sunny, and I'm going to give her, and then I'm going to come back.
Okay. Can we get the slides up? Oh, perfect. Thank you, Dr. Purnell. Good morning. So Maeve and I are just going to go through some slides really quick to just kind of level set and kind of set the tone before we dive into the amazing research and data that Dr. Purnell is going to present. So I'm going to go through. So good morning. I'm not going to have you say good morning to each other, but good morning. And we just are so happy to be here. So Dr. Sunny Greene, I am the Guided Pathways Regional Coordinator, along with my colleague Maeve, for the Bay Area. So we are happy to serve the 28 colleges in the Bay. So before we get started, just one of the things we wanted to remind you throughout the keynote, plus today, because you have a lot of work ahead of you today and the semester, just remember to breathe. So one of our colleagues, Dr. Lisa Gwen, just if you pay attention to your body, pay attention to what you need. So if you need to get up and walk around, if you need to go to the bathroom, get something to drink, just take that time and remember to breathe. So we just wanted to, and then your team today. And this is just today's flow. We did the intro, sense making. We're going to go through the wonderful data, and we'll do a little bit of Q&A throughout the presentation. There will also be opportunities not only to ask questions, but to get your questions on a Padlet. So because there's a lot of you here, and there's folks online, so we want to make sure that you all have a chance. And we won't be able to answer them throughout the session, but we'll be able to refer to them and hopefully get you those answers later. And then some next moves and resources. So we're just happy to be here. All right. And go.
Good morning from a Vista Community College alum, way back. And thank you to Dr. Greene and Dr. Purnell. I'm already breathing a little bit deeper. As Dr. Greene and I get to support the 28 colleges, we wanted to share our understanding of Vision 2030 that is really about equitable success in learning and baccalaureate attainment, and critically workforce and economic development, because we want our students to be able to live their dreams, but to be able to stay here in the Bay with so much displacement and compression of wealth going on. We frame guided pathways in trees versus colonial pillars, because trees are part of the ecosystem that they set within. They are loyal to their soil. They are part of the environment. And so as we look at this work, and faculty and staff and classified professionals and students grappling with SCIF and what is going on in DC, we really have observed incredible progress. And on the next slide, we hope to synthesize just a little bit of what all of you have done in the past 7 years. Just incredible transformative efforts to clarify and enter the path. And in doing so, really provided evidence-based practices, based on your inquiry into what your students and communities need. And it is with that heart and mind that I am so proud to turn this floor over to Dr. Rogéair Purnell, who I met when I was working in Eagle Village 3 before the tower was even done.
Thank you all again for having me. I'm just so excited to see some familiar faces. I'm going to stand here, and I want to share with you some research around transfer. This is some work that I was able to partner with the research and planning group to do, and I'm going to share a few things. I'm going to go pretty fast. There's quite a few slides, but a lot of good information. And then we'll use the Padlets, which I'll explain in a minute, so you might want to have your phone ready because you can provide respond and provide an answer, ask questions that we'll try to respond to as much as we can. So the RP group, which is the Research and Planning Group for California Community Colleges, began kind of as a membership group for planners, researchers at community colleges. So its roots are in the California Community College system. It's a nonprofit, nonpartisan nonprofit that's really about lifting up student voice and providing research, planning, and support to the California Community College system to make life better for not only its people, but its students, right? And so I've had the good fortune to work with the RP group, which was their short name for quite a while, and I'm going to tell you about this research that they led. And the first is this Through the Gate study. And the RP group was really curious about what does the transfer landscape look like in California, right? So they asked the statewide chancellor's office for data to be able to take a look at what's happening when it comes to transfer for students. And so what they did was they found that there was kind of 5 stops along a transfer continuum for students. So the first, and again, this is based on statewide data for the system. So the kind of dark red students, those are the transfer explorers. So those are the students that have 12 to 44 transferable units completed within 6-year time frame, right? So those are the students that haven't yet transferred, but their course-taking behavior suggests that they're on a transfer path. Then you have the kind of violet-colored figure there. Those are the momentum students. So those are students that have achieved 45 to 59 transferable credits. They're maintaining that 2.0 GPA. Why is that important? Financial aid, yes. But they have not yet transferred. And then you have the students that are kind of in that purpley color there. And I'm going to talk a lot about these students. So remember these characteristics. These are students that are near the transfer gate. And those students that have 60 or more transferable units completed with a 2.0 GPA, but missing transferable English and or math, okay? And they have not yet transferred. And then the students in the green are those that are at the gate. They have associate's degree for transfer, they've completed the requirements for transfer, they have a 2.0, and they've completed transfer level English and math, but have not yet transferred. And then the other group, in the yellow, the figure in the yellow, those are the students that have made it through the transfer gate. So those are the various points along the continuum. But one thing they found that was very interesting is when they looked at African American black students, and I'll say black students throughout just for time's sake, they were 2 times more likely to transfer than white students if they could make it to the near the gate point, right? So what's the issue with that? How many black students make it to that point, right? So really wanted to drill down and find out what more could be done to make sure that more black students were making it to that point. When you think about the data that 2/3 of black students that start their post-secondary journey do so at a California community college, and then over half leave without completing, so really wanted to find out what more could be done and what could we learn from students about what more could be done to help them make it through the transfer gate. So that led to the African American Transfer Tipping Point Study, which I'm going to spend some time talking with you about now. Thank you to the Lumina Foundation for supporting this work. And there were 2 key questions for this research. Like, what are the factors that are supporting Black student transfer? And are there any programs or practices that should be highlighted or lifted up to really do more to help students, this group of students, make it through the transfer gate? So there are 3 key phases to the work. The first was looking at course taking patterns. So again, asking the Chancellor's Office for data and looking at what students are doing and what's happening for them. Phase 2, the part that I was involved in, was interviewing and doing focus groups with students. So we talked to administrators and students at campuses where they had the data suggested they were doing well when it came to Black student transfer. And then there was a survey that was done of Black students. Again, all of this focused on California community college students. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the findings from each of these. So phase 1. So again, we looked at data from the Chancellor's Office. There were 6 kind of cohorts of students between these years. We looked over 6 years, and we pulled students that had at least completed 12 transferable units with passing grades. Because again, that suggested that those students were on a transfer journey. And these are the groups of students that were included. And I want to tell you what we found in terms of, if you look at Black students that had these characteristics and Black students that did not have these characteristics. So those are the groups that we're comparing here. So Black students to Black students, right? Passing transfer level English and math in the first year, those Black students, compared to other Black students that had not done that, were 310% more likely to get to that near the gate point. Now, I'm not saying to tell every student to take math and English transfer level. I'm not saying that, because someone said to me, oh, you're telling us to tell every student. But the odds are, if a student completes transfer level English, math, and English in the first year, 310% more likely to make it to that near transfer gate. And what did I tell you about Black students that make it to the near transfer gate? How many times more likely are they? Yes, right. I'm not a betting person, but I might be in Vegas right now if someone told me that the odds were that I would win. Yeah, okay. So transfer level math, but not English in the first year, 160%. Transfer level English, transfer level math, but not English, 160%. So math is critically important. And when we think about students getting near the transfer gate, passing math, transfer level math, and maintaining a high GPA were often barriers students mentioned. And then transfer level English, 70% more likely. If receiving academic counseling, 60% more likely. Participation in a MOSHA, does everyone have a MOSHA program here? Okay, 20% more likely. Now there's some factors that were associated with not, moving in the opposite direction, coming from an economically disadvantaged background, being part of DSPS, being put on probation. I'm going to talk more about this, right? 70% more likely to make it to that near the gate point. So when we look at other students, so when we compare Black students to non-Black students on these measures, counseling for non-Black students, 110% more likely to make it near the transfer gate. So there's a disconnect there. So counseling for some reason isn't as impactful for Black students as it is for other students. And then 41% of Black students were put on probation. Again, we're looking at statewide data versus 29%. And think about from this data, what probation, the impact it has on Black students, right? When in terms of getting to the transfer gate. We also pulled data for the district, right? And I'm just going to share a few of the slides with you. And there's more slides at the end of the slide deck that I'm not going to be able to get to just for time's sake. But this gives you, again, a look at statewide data, which is in gray, and then the data for each of the colleges. If there's no bar there, that means it wasn't statistically significant or there weren't enough Black students to do the analysis. So basically what this says is that, again, showing the difference between Black students that have these factors are able to access these services versus Black students that didn't. So for example, for counseling, for Laney, Black students that received counseling were 70% more likely than Black students who had not to make it to that near the transfer gate point. Again, the data's in the direction that we saw for the statewide data, but I give these to you as something to kind of chew on and to kind of inform the work that you'll do this year. So let's look at the district and statewide data as well. So we talked about certain key factors, transfer level English and math as being critical in that first year. Right? Look at what happens for students that complete transfer level math by campus. You see here the impacts it has, very positive. Now, I'm not going to tell you why it's more positive for some campuses and others. That's something for you to explore. Math only, again, very positive effects. Look what's happening at Merit. It's really having a really huge impact for students there. And then English only, right? So again, taking transfer level English and math in the first year seems to have a positive impact on making it to near the transfer gate point. Phase 2. Any quick questions about that? Does that make sense to people? Okay. So phase 2. So phase 2 was the interviews with administrators and focus groups with students from campuses that had fairly positive Black transfer student rates, right? Counseling was very interesting. A lot of the students we spoke to in the focus groups said to us that they didn't really go to general counseling or transfer counseling. A lot of them mentioned an affinity program or a categorical program where they went for counseling support. And part of the reason they said is like, I don't feel like they understand my story. I have to kind of repeat myself. It's kind of they pull out a checklist and start going through it. I don't feel seen. People don't reflect my background. So I really don't tend to go to the general counseling or the transfer center, right? And so I often talked about EOPS and Emotia as being places where they felt like they were seen, belonged. And a lot of times with these programs, there's a dedicated person, again, that knows the student's story, knows what they're working towards, and kind of can keep up with them and support them. And that was really, really important to students. And this idea of having to kind of open up and share your story each time you may meet with a different person was really difficult for a lot of students, and that came up quite a bit. The other thing that was really critical for students was this idea of academic probation. Even the term itself was triggering for a lot of students because of its connection to the criminal justice system. And students and administrators had different perspectives on this. Administrators are like, oh, this is great. It's a chance for us to get there to that student and provide just-in-time support and make sure that they don't fall through the cracks. Students had a very different impression of this. They're like, I have to fend for myself now. They've given up on me. I can't even get financial aid. And now there's all these additional requirements that I have to do. And no one even asked me what happened. Like, why am I on academic probation, right? So really two different perspectives. Is there any other term that anyone's using instead of academic probation, or is that the term that's used? No? Yes? I'm sorry? At risk? Okay. So the term itself, maybe something to even start there and determine how we could do something different. And then Emotia matters. The reason I spoke about having a dedicated counselor, someone that's reflective of their background, and really having someone that understood their story, could check in with them regularly. You know, I know you had that math test, how did it go? Those things were really critical to students. And then having someone who was able to be responsive to them, whether it be by email, by phone, checking where have you been, those types of things students mentioned is critically important, and why they really found value in being part of the Emotia program. The students also mentioned faculty by name. When we talked to them in the focus groups, they talked about this person helped me with. And particularly in those critical courses I talked to you about, the transfer level English and math courses, just saying that having someone being there for them, supporting them, showing them that they cared about their success, providing them feedback when they needed that feedback to do better was also something that came up for students. Now I'm going to talk about phase 3, right? And that was the survey that was done. So we had the look at statewide data and looking at course taking patterns. We did the interviews and the focus groups, and then we did a survey of Black students. Right? So these were the students that were invited to participate. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we learned and about the 168 Peralta students that completed the survey. But we wanted to find students that had transferred to a university, those that had exited without transfer, and quite a few had planned to transfer at some point but had not, and then those that were currently enrolled in one of the, 116 campuses. So the survey looked at a number of different constructs. The first was the 6 success factors. So does anyone know about the 6 success factors? Yeah, so this was some research that the RP group did quite a while ago. And we identified through a student survey these 6 factors as being critically important. This is what students told us that was important to their success. So, being directed. Oftentimes when we heard about direction, it was an ed plan and having that, and the academic counseling they received. Being focused, often students mentioned some type of degree audit program or some regular check-in where they knew they were completing the requirements that were necessary. Being nurtured, and I don't mean babying or anything like that, but really having someone who showed them that they were concerned about their success and wanted them to succeed. So that's what I mean by nurtured. Engaged, so students that are like, that student on campus that's involved in clubs, that speaks up in class, that's sitting up front, those were things that we looked at in terms of engaged. And then being connected, students feeling like they were part of the college campus, so wanting to hang out after, being places with other students talked about that. And then being valued, being seen, for what they could bring to campus, for the value that they brought. So students that often, when they talked about I feel directed, they often talked about being focused. When they talked about being connected, they often talked about being engaged, and vice versa. And one thing that was really critical, students that felt that they were being nurtured often felt connected, often felt engaged, often felt valued, right? So being nurtured was often critically important. The survey also looked at microaggressions, and these are just some of the things that we wanted to examine because students in the focus groups mentioned things that had happened in class that made them feel not seen, right? Or uncomfortable, like being the token black. Tell us about, what happens in the black community when they're the only black person in class. And I have some other examples of that. Or raising their hand and constantly never being called upon, those types of things. And so these are the kind of constructs we examine to see their possible influence on transfer for the groups of students that I mentioned to you. And then we also wanted to look at the 4 core things that came out of the focus groups as well, and that was passing transfer level English and math, and the statewide data. Academic counseling, participation in UMOJA, and then this status, academic probation status. So what we learned was that this transfer level passing transfer level math and English was really very important. And we wanted to see how many students had passed these courses on their first attempt. So you'll see this provides data for the district and for statewide. And so math, that's really a sticky wicket, right? A lot of students who took that the first time did not pass it. What does that do to your confidence when you don't do something well the first time? Anybody? I'm gonna raise my hand. You've done something, you take that test, and you thought, oh, I'm gonna do well, and you're like, oh, I didn't, should I stick it out, right? Should I continue? So really, this is just data, again, to show you what we found in terms of pass rates for math and English. In terms of why this might be the case or what could be contributing to this, we also looked at microaggressions, again, those items I mentioned to you, and pass rates for students the first time they took English, transfer level English and math. Doesn't seem, being subject to microaggressions doesn't seem to have much of an impact on English as it does on math. So if you look at students that experience at least one microaggression regularly, only 25% of them completed transfer level math the first time they took the course, right? So here's an example of a microaggression. So this is a student in a class, and the instructor wasn't calling on black students. I guess normally had the lights off and said, well, I don't call you because I can't see you. I guess she thought this was funny. This is not funny. This is offensive. And as a student in this class, how would you feel if they're... So little, I'm not going to say little, things like this students mention quite often, right? Or someone said something that was blatantly racist or homophobic or what have you, and not being called out or called in to have a discussion about why that wasn't appropriate. And then thinking about having to go back to that class every week and like, what's next? What else are they going to say, right? So this is where we're going to use the Padlet. But what do people think might help to address these situations? What are something that faculty can do, I'm going to say anyone can do, to help students that are dealing with microaggressions? I know this is not a shy group. Yes?
Recruit students to work in tutoring centers, and like we're best if we have students who represent all kinds of cultural groups, and then the students are working with, like that alone is getting overwhelming.
So really expanding representation in the tutoring center, right? Of student representation, right? Yeah.
So online, they said hire more black educators.
So hire more black educators?
I think administrators need to make it clear that people can maintain their anonymity if they want to, but making students more invited and comfortable to complain.
Yeah, so file complaints, right? So students should know how to do it and feel comfortable doing it, right? If something like this happens. Yeah, yes, yes.
There should be education for faculty around microaggressions and how they impact students of color, the students in general. That's where it needs to start. Because if this is happening, I was going to ask you earlier, what were some of the conversations that you had with students about their existential experiences or their lived experiences in the classroom? And so now I'm hearing this, which is great, but the education around microaggressions has to be with faculty. You know, that's the first place that it needs to be, because that's where it's happening. People who engage in microaggressive behavior are not aware often that they're doing it because they are so accustomed to doing it. It's a natural thing, to be this, walk in a classroom and say, women don't usually do really well with these kind of tests, stereotype, I expected more.
Can you use the mic too? Because I think what you're saying is really important. We have a lot of people on Zoom, and so we'll try to pass the mic around to.
So I'm just saying that many people who engage in that kind of behavior have done it for so long that they're not even aware that they're doing it until someone calls them. So we have to be in a place, everyone, when we hear it, to call a person on it, and there needs to be some education around what microaggressions and stereotype threat are, so that people are aware. I think that if you make people cognizant of it and give them examples of it, they begin to curb their behavior. It's only curbed because, again, it's natural for many people.
Thank you. Yeah. So the comment was that really need to call people on this and to get training and support on this, because some people think, they don't think there's anything wrong with this until it's been brought to their attention that this is not appropriate. Right? So we'll bring a microphone here. Or actually, I have another one.
Dr. Purnell, we have a lot going on in the Catholic, similar to onboarding, reporting Catholic communities, and
Okay, so I'm going to move on from this question. Oh, one more comment, and then I'm going to, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say beyond education, just wanted to throw in restorative justice, non-punitive strategy to approach conflict and harm. So being able to have trained facilitators that are able to come in and provide support, conflict mediation, and help, transformation in those that are perpetuating harmful behaviors.
Absolutely. Because it could be an opportunity to call someone in a way, and I mean, obviously you want to address the behavior, but how do we do this in a way that's going to make a change, right? All right, I'm going to talk a little bit about academic counseling. Please continue to add comments to the Padlet, and we'll share those. So 2/3 of the students said that they would prefer, and again, these were Black students that were surveyed, they would prefer to see a Black counselor, but only half had the ability to do that. At Peralta, it was different. 71% of those 168 students that responded to the survey that were from the district said they had seen a Black counselor, and 76 said they would prefer to. And then 42% of those students who had successfully transferred met with a Black counselor compared to 33%. Right? Now I can't get into the whys, I'm just presenting the data to you. Right? So when we think about those 6 success factors that I talked about, so being directed, focused, nurtured, engaged, and so forth, the more counseling students received, the more likely they were to say they had experienced those factors, right? Particularly for focused, right? So again, just want to emphasize how critical academic counseling was for students across the board. So, our next question here. So someone mentioned hiring more faculty, more counselors who are Black. But what other things could be done to help Black students besides that, to feel like it's worthwhile to go to counseling, to go see a counselor?
Meeting students where they're at, meaning in the classroom, so counselors through different initiatives that Laney have linked with an English or a math instructor to partner and do integrated counseling, give presentations on what is counseling, just to be there also just to see a counselor's face, and explain what our role is, because often students have had different experiences with counseling. Sometimes counselors dull the discipline in the K through 12 and those types of things, so helping them kind of understand what we do in this context and providing them with contacts to the counseling department, and even sometimes scheduling appointments during that presentation to kind of grab students when we're fresh in their minds.
Other thoughts? What about someone in the back? Any thoughts in response to this question? We'll start here and then we'll go.
Ensure that it's in the identity of the institution itself. Have like images everywhere of people that are Black, that are successful, that are students, that are our students currently, that have like narratives of where they come from and why this is their college or district. It needs to be everywhere. It can't just be in the student center. It needs to be in the classrooms. It needs to be in the welcome center, that people see with their eyes. And perception is a truth a lot of the time, especially with our communities that we serve.
So some claps for that, thank you. Was there another comment? Okay, back here.
And Dr. Purnell, on the Padlet, we also have the lifting up student stories, success stories, and also lifting up counselors so that they are held up in the community as resources.
Yes. Yes, time and time again during the focus group, students again mentioned people by name. This person helped me, gave specific examples of how that person had supported them, help them with something that ensured that they were going to be successful in their transfer journey. So there was a comment? Yes.
Hi, yes. Increase fiscal support for improving tutoring programs, such as the Learning Center, more hiring of Black students to be tutors across campus in all the disciplines, more variety because students are on Zoom or online more, and they need to connect with those tutors, and having a real platform that allows for that to do that, that is not overwhelming for the people who manage these areas.
Thank you. I think customer service training is critical. It doesn't matter who is sitting before you, it's when you come and how you're greeted and the level of support that you get. And if that's positive, students will say, oh wow, I went to see so-and-so and God, she was so enthusiastic and she really helped me, or he really, laid out a plan for me and was smiling and made me feel good. So if there's customer service training, when people are in service positions, sometimes they forget they are supposed to be servicing the public. And that's anyone who comes. So if people are sitting waiting and your demeanor changes depending on who you're helping, people notice that. So customer service training, service with a smile goes a long way. And being well-trained, knowing exactly what you're doing so the student comes away feeling served. If the student says, I want to be a chemist, then you do everything you can to help the student lay out a program. You don't say, well, I really don't think you'd be good at that, okay? Because that is the experience of some of the students.
Dr. Purnell, we have a couple more in the community Padlet. One person would love to have a 10-minute video showing her or his class all the benefits of academic counseling that could be shared right at the beginning of the course. Others would like videos of the counseling faculty, particularly the Black counselors, and then small group counseling opportunities, and then incorporation of all of these beings into the curriculum.
Awesome examples. Yes, thank you. We did hear that a lot in some of the focus groups, particularly students that were in STEM majors. Like, oh, you want to be an engineer or a doctor or what have you thought about something not those things, right? So again, things just to be aware of. And I know people in this room aren't doing that, right? So it's not an issue. Right? And then emotion was critically important for students. And the things that we heard is that these students were more likely to have gone to counseling at least 3 times. And what did I say about going to counseling at least 3 times? So that was associated with what?
Success.
Successful transfer and 6 success factors, right? And also many students in the Emotia program had seen a Black counselor, and again, we talked about how important that was for students and how many wanted that. And then talked often about, this is a space where I can belong, I can be myself, there's other students like me who are taking courses and studying things that are relevant for my community. I'm figuring out how I can give back to my community as a result of being in these courses. And then again, students were more likely to identify those emotion with those 6 success factors. So what are they? Directed, focused. What's special about nurtured? If you're nurtured, you're often the other things, right? Connected, engaged, and valued, right? And the RP group has a lot of resources about those factors and how you can infuse those factors in the work that you do every day. So they're on their website. And then, so Emotia is a program, but how could we take some of the work that Emotia is doing, some of the philosophy, the approaches, and expand that to help more students?
Scaling the Umoja principles, right? They would serve all students. So the program has a pretty structured a set of values that it embeds in the community, and you can take some of those values and infuse them in other elements of the educational institution.
Other thoughts on this?
This kind of makes me think of like how, like what principles from Umoja can be actually like embedded in the classroom assignments. That way it doesn't feel kind of like disjointed from the learnings in that space as well.
Who could give me an idea of something that could be embedded from Umoja in a classroom assignment?
Counseling is integrated into most things. A counselor is usually part of, often the coordinator as well, and has the students in mind. And so in like requiring student education plans to engage students to go to their counselor, as well, making that an assignment. Some teachers have it as an extra credit assignment. I'm a counseling instructor as well, so I have it as a required assignment.
Okay, great. I also learned some focus groups I'm doing on another transfer project, that if a class, like an instructor called out for whatever reason, they had a ready set of counselors to go in and do a whole module on transfer. So took advantage of the opportunity to kind of get students to know more of the counseling faculty and to share with them resources around transfer. So, yes.
From online, one of the responses was more African American Black cohorts for transfer level math and English, and also transfer workshop.
From the Padlet community, having support embedded, peer mentorship. And then another post says, I need more information about Umoja. I've never even heard of it, and I don't know what it is. I'll definitely look it up, but I'm concerned I'm just now hearing about this resource.
Right. So Umoja, affinity program for that really looks at the Black diaspora. You do not have to be Black to be part of the program, but a lot of the courses, the approach are focused on the culture, Black culture. A lot of the reading assignments, there's also professional development that's part of it. So people that are part of the program, they have a summit. I've been fortunate to present at the summit. So it's really a holistic approach focused on Black students. So, and there's a set of principles that guide the work that are also, if you go to Umoja community, you can find out more about it. Okay. So academic probation. So again, I told you the concerns students had about academic probation. And remember the student that said, they didn't ask me what happened. Like they just said, you know, oftentimes it was a letter, very formal. Please pull out your academic probation letter and read it. Read it aloud. And to someone who doesn't know, and ask them how they feel about if they received that letter, right? The language is often very formal. It's very, you're in trouble, you better do this now or else, right? So a lot of students said, you know, no one really asked me what happened. So we looked at the students that were currently on academic probation and those who had never been on academic probation. So those currently on academic probation are the lighter blue line. And mental health struggles was most commonly mentioned by these students as something they had been struggling with recently. Difficulty completing their courses. Remember what I said about not completing that math or English course that first time and what that might do to your confidence. And then basic needs came up quite a bit. And in more recent focus groups, I'm hearing more about students struggling with just housing and food, right? So again, it's just another reminder, opportunity to ask students what could be going on for you that's related to academic probation. And then we looked again here at Peralta. So a little over 1/3 said they were either currently on academic probation or had been at some point. And it's statewide, it's 29%. And overall, they said that the support they had received was somewhat or very helpful to them. Right? So maybe let's figure out what it is. You know, and again, this was a survey, so we didn't go that deep, but this is an opportunity to find out from those students what was so helpful that we could help those students that said it was not helpful or slightly helpful, right? So what do you think that the district could do, or you at your institution could do, to help students before they get on academic probation, while they're on probation, and then after they move off of probation? Any thoughts on what could be done for these students to make sure they stay and get to that near the gate point?
I'm an art teacher, and I'm thinking about what you said about assignments. During COVID, I gave an assignment to the whole class called Loss. And I was very surprised at what they drew. I had one young black student, a young man with disabilities, who drew just an extraordinary drawing. And he's continued to take my classes. And so I think that as we engage with students and we think of opportunities to engage with the problems they have, make it general. And then the student who has a need or wants to express what they need to express can do it in an open environment.
There's a quick question about the data. Does it separate the academic and conference probation?
No, I think it just looked at in general. Yes. There's a hand up over here.
I wasn't sure what's included with the letters about academic probation, but maybe including resources for the students based on what their needs are, so having counseling, Umoja, disability services, those sorts of things, having that listed as resources, or possibly online as well, so that they can go online and easily click and then make appointments.
I think another thing that we could do is boost funding and resources for the learning centers, make sure we have enough tutors to support the students' needs. So where they would also have funds to go out in the overall campus community, put on events, stuff like that, workshops and fairs and stuff like that, to get more students drawn into the learning centers. I think that's satisfied before, during, and after.
And I meant to say student accessibility.
Student accessibility services as well. Okay.
Oh, so just to kind of piggyback off of what Rajan just said, he works in the Learning Center. He leads the Learning Center. I also work in the Learning Center. I'm an English instructor, but I find that bringing all of the support services into the classroom within the first 2 weeks of the semester is helpful. And also being a product alumni of Laney College and sharing my story, it does help the students to say, oh, okay, she did it, I can do it. But the before, after, and in between, I've had students take my class more than once. And what I find is that if you can just listen, because a lot of students come from, they may be, have challenges with where they live. Some students are dealing with domestic violence. I mean, there's so much that the students go through, and we don't know because we don't know them individually. But as an instructor, I'm like, okay, I'm here for you. This is the support for you, and how can I teach you how to advocate for yourself? If I can get you to do that before the semester is over, then I think I'm doing a pretty good job.
So on that point, some recent focus groups I've done, students mentioned hearing the faculty, their professors or instructors' stories was really critical. Some students said, oh, I had a chemistry professor that everyone loved. Had no idea that she had started her journey at a community college, right? Also having that last page of any syllabus, having all the resources for students was critically important. And then students said one of the things once they transferred, one of the critical things they had learned at the community college was how to advocate for themselves. how to take advantage of available services. So those were some of the things that came up. So
I would just say the quickest thing we could do is change the language, right? So instead of academic probation, it's academic pause or something to that effect. And then when students find themselves there, reaching out to them when they don't return, when they're eligible to return, or having some kind of nudges where there's contact so you normalize the experience, because many students find themselves there just as an inability to navigate our systems, not necessarily as a competency issue. So I would just add that piece.
Yeah, Mark Lispy, Berkeley City College. I definitely have had many students on academic probation, and I think this is where it's really, we see that it's a systemic problem, that to put the idea of putting students first, unfortunately, really means at my school, having more people like Janine Greer who are counselors that we can do warm handoffs to. I mean, that changes everything. Having more counselors, more faculty, smaller class sizes. This would mean really putting students first, but when we're continuously in this cycle of cutting courses, cutting sections, laying off staff, and not prioritizing students first, we're perpetuating this system where the students that we want to reach, the ones that are in most severe conditions that could benefit the most from help like this, are thrown by the wayside. So these numbers aren't surprising.
I think something else that is really important is developing early alert systems for students. I know it's difficult as an institution to do so, but in learning communities and programs of support, there can be like more early benchmarks to identify students that are struggling. For example, in the first 2 weeks, if you don't see a student showing up in the roster and you know they're connected to a program, or part of SAS, maybe send an email to the program, or the program itself keep track of the students that are in your cohorts to ensure that if they're not coming into the program, that you reach out to them, that they come to the program, you understand why they're struggling at the beginning of the semester, and have your team ready to give them the support for counseling, talk to someone for mental health. And that's more of a holistic matter, and you do need resources. That takes a lot of planning, but those are things that are really essential for students that do come to our doors every day. So I think being intentional about that, don't wait until the drop date to reach out to students. This has to be ongoing, and you need to make sure that whatever you have is effective for them.
Dr. Purnell?
one more comment and then we'll summarize that.
Hi, I'm Dr. Lilia Chavez. I'm the Vice President of Student Services at Merritt College. We are talking about counselors, and it would be very important also to hear their voice. Previously, I was a counselor, and I think one of the issues I had was the racial. How many students, if you look at this, we use ConnectSed, a person can see 10 different people at different times. Our drop-ins are 10 minutes? You're asking people to make decisions, life decisions in 10 minutes. That's a problem. If they're doing an appointment, it's half an hour. Well, we can't, especially with students that already are challenged or at risk or in that pause mode, we need to really assess the way we provide that service to the student. And we need to start by that ratio, because we're asking people to do more with less, and I get that, but the reality is the student is really the one that's impacted at the end. So that needs to change, and we need more counselors of diverse backgrounds.
Dr. Purnell, from the online community, find out why, go to the source, provide support, and then a lot of support for looking at process and language that's used, and then very directed and intentional supports from basic needs to math trauma to really respond to the why that students experience.
Thank you. Thank you. And we'll, again, compile the kind of responses and share those with you all. So what do students say is their tipping point, right? Because that was the goal of what factors and what practices were really related to getting students to at least that near the gate status, right? So we talked to over 3,000 students or had requested feedback either through the survey or the focus groups. And when students felt supported, and I mentioned ways they felt supported, that faculty member, they gave them comments on their writing, for example. Some other work I'm doing, it seems like English 1A, the transfer level English class, is really critical for students because it helps them learn how to write, to cite, to gather information and summarize it. Something really powerful there for all their courses moving forward. Wasn't part of the study, but I thought I'd share that came across. And really feeling like they could be an advocate for themselves. They had the information they needed to be successful, so having that education plan, that path to navigate where they wanted to go was also important. And then hitting those critical milestones, those academic milestones. So keeping their GPA up, and then completing that transfer level math class, right? So these were really critical for students that were working towards transfer, and probably any student, right? So in terms of counseling, to the points that have been made, so really thinking again, as I mentioned, not pulling out a checklist and saying, okay, let's go through this. And I understand the need for that, because you're right, the counseling appointments are short. They're often drop-in. The student may not be able to say the same person they saw last time. But if there's any way to make it more personal, to be more about, okay, tell me a little bit about what you want your journey to be, where you want to end up, and let's work backwards to make sure you get there. And then even students that had a plan that said, oh, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to transfer here, and these are the requirements, many of those students just didn't have confidence that it was going to happen, right? And felt stuck. And we heard that a lot. I didn't feel confident. I didn't know for sure if I was going to be able to make it, right? I know what I need to do, but... So here are a couple quotes. Having a counselor that knows my situation, again, that point of someone who knows the student's journey and kind of knows what assets they're bringing and what maybe challenges they had. I had another student in a focus group who told me, I love my instructor and my counselor because they see me as a whole person. And I said, what do you mean by that? And they're like, well, they understand I have kids, that that's a responsibility, that outside of school I have other things that I need to focus on, and they understand that. We had quite a few students that didn't think they were going to transfer until they got the acceptance letter from the university. That's wild to me. These are quite a few units you need to complete before you get that letter, right? And students didn't believe it was true until they actually got the letter. So many students said that. The RP group did some other work where they asked students to talk about transfer and what they needed to transfer. And there were 4 key elements that came up. University affordability, so understanding the cost associated with going to a university. So that meant, not just your tuition, but your housing, thinking about transportation. I'm recently doing some other focus groups around transfer, and students will like, how am I going to get there if I don't have a car? What's that going to cost? So really understanding the full costs of going to the university. Also having a clear ed plan, so this pathway navigation, understanding everything they were going to need to take, what the GPA requirements were if I go to UC Davis versus Berkeley versus somewhere else, really understanding each little step along the journey, right? Balancing school and life was critical. Interestingly, students said if I can get a job on campus, that greatly helps with my school life balance. Because I'm often around students who are also looking to transfer. I don't have to leave campus to work. I'm making money. But really helping students balance life as well. And then having a support network. So connecting with other students or staff or faculty who, again, can have their back when their confidence is low, is telling them you can do it, watching other people take that journey and be successful. All of those things are also critical. So these were the 4 kind of things students told us that was critical to their transfer journey. And again, I mentioned having an education plan. It's so funny, I'll be doing student focus groups, And there'll be always a student who does not have an ed plan. And you all will be happy because the other students are like, what? You don't have an ed plan? You need to go see Mrs. or Mr. or, right away. I'm gonna give you their number right now. You cannot be here and not have an ed plan, right? So students understand the critical importance of having an ed plan. But again, students having that plan didn't mean that they were confident. They still had great anxiety that they weren't gonna finish, right? And so some of them, again, didn't realize it. So what could we do if Starfish or early alert system? I remember when I was in graduate school, I had a colleague that had this little voice on her computer. Every time she opened her computer, it says, you have 10 days left before you get that master's degree, right? So what could we send out to students to let them know that they're getting close, right? And to celebrate their successes along the transfer journey. So again, when we're thinking about the transfer navigation, this clearly outlined path was critical for students and a step-by-step process. Another thing that students said was critical is understanding this course that you need may not be offered every semester. So when I sat down to do the ed plan, that the instructor said, or the counselor said to me, hey, this chemistry class, we only offer it in the fall, right? So what do we need to do to make sure you can focus on that chemistry class? So how do we set up the rest of your schedule, since you know that's going to be a challenging class? How do we do that in a way that we can be sure that you won't have to wait a year to take it again, right? So that level of support. The other thing in terms of tipping points, the other factor that was critical and makes sense that they're making meeting the milestones that are required for transfer. So they have the number of units that they need, and they're keeping their GPA up, right? And different programs require different GPA, different university programs to enter. So students being aware of that was critically important. And then feeling confident, getting momentum by meeting some of these milestones, and most often math was mentioned. Like when I finished that math class, I successfully completed that math class, I knew I was going to be successful, right? So looking for places along the way that are going to help build a student's momentum and confidence. So these are just, again, some of the student quotes. Reaching that 50 credit mark was critical. Passing the math class with an A. Keeping a relatively high GPA. Again, reaching these milestones for these students let them know that they were likely to be successful in their transfer journey. Any questions about what I've shared so far? Any comments? You're welcome. Yeah, there's one comment back here. Can you raise your hand one more time?
I think everything that you pointed out is right on point, but we're missing a good second piece to that. And that is there's a lot of students that will not be able to transfer. They're not at that level of transfer preparation. And I just want to say that I think building a secondary pathway to careers, to actually landing sustainable jobs, from building skill sets here that they can manage early on, because math, English, those foundation classes are going to hit and open doors for them. But they know that it's going to be unreachable for them to transfer to UC or CSU, because their biggest priority is sustainability and finding employment and stabilizing themselves, so that when they do get into some career choice, that they will think about what other level I need to go, and then revert back to us for the rest of their career training. Does that make sense, everybody? Because I just feel that I don't want to lose that portion of our student population because we're only concentrating on one direct pathway to transfer at the moment. Because right now, I think we're losing some students because it's like, dude, I need to get a job first before I can even think about, because I'm not going to get financial aid right now. I'm on probation, obviously. And so that mindset is, so what kind of skill do I have that can get me gainfully employed so I can stabilize and maybe take part-time classes? So are we offering those? at that type of a scale that an employer would want to hire. So that's just my comment.
And I thank you for that, right? Yeah, so I'm not, and I want to be sure it doesn't come across like all students need to transfer. That's not what this is about. It's really looking at that. The study opened up that question about, oh, if we get black students to this near the transfer point, they're 2 times more likely to transfer. Let's explore that a little more, right? And there's actually, the RP group has done some work also on career and technical education and other programming and its impact on students. So I would recommend that. Okay. So we didn't find a singular tipping point. It wasn't like if students complete transfer level math, they're good. They're going to transfer, right? But there was many things that I've shared with you in terms of the journey and things that happen along that journey that would make it more likely for black students to transfer. So based on this, there's some recommendations, and you all have shared some of those things with me. But I wanted to see if there was any other feedback online that we should share.
They were talking about confidence building activities, just a variety of some really good suggestions about languaging as well as changing the language, and but we'll add all this to the Padlet. So.
Great. I just want to keep our folks online engaged as well. Just some recommendations, and again, some of these have been mentioned. But is there any way to figure out how to partner with those universities where we know many of our students are doing? Some other work I'm doing is many of the students talked about being able to talk to a transfer counselor at the university, right? Or be part of a workshop, or go to a transfer day where there's representatives available. I know you'll probably do that as well. Or taking a tour, simply being on a college campus and meeting people there and seeing like, wow, I could see myself here, right? And then also having clear transfer pathways. And again, not every student's going to want to transfer, but for those students who want to, or may not even know what transfer is about, being aware of what the transfer pathways are and what it would take to complete them. And then we talked about counseling and student support and ways to strengthen both. Really focusing on how do I build a relationship in 10 minutes with a student? Is that possible? What are things that I could build in to make it feel less transactional? And then also professional development. Are there workshops? Are there conferences? Are there other trainings that we could take part of that would help us deal with many of the things that may be barriers for our students? And then really thinking about how do we personalize the support in a way that speaks to what the students' needs and strengths might be, right? And really kind of think about what language might be punitive. How do we talk about this in a way where a student sees it as an opportunity and support versus, as the student said, you've given up on me, I have to fend for myself now. That's how I felt when I got the letter about academic probation, right? And then the other is we talked about training for faculty on, because again, people may not be aware on what their biases might be and how they may be showing up in the classroom that makes certain groups of students feel uncomfortable. Thinking about how do we develop assignments and readings and things that speak to Black students' experiences. And then just making it very, very clear, and this already came up, that there's no room for racism, and that there should be a place and a way to confidentially and to report these things, and that something will be done as a result. I did some other focus groups where this came up, and students said, yes, I reported it, but nothing happened, which is just as bad as the racist incident itself. So, and then really working to figure out how do we build Black representation across the campus? And that might be, again, hiring more Black folks. And then also figuring out what are the best practices from Umoja that you could lift up. So I did some work on the ethic of love, which is one of their principles. You can find that report on the RP Group website, really how students talked about how that showed up for them in the classroom and why that was critically important to their success. And then there's other programs. Students often mention EOPS. They mention MESA and some of the work that I've done as being really important. So really looking to those programs where you're seeing students be successful from groups that historically have been underrepresented or less successful, and figuring out what is working. So that means talking to students and really finding out what's important, most important and impactful for them. And then the other is to really figure out ways to celebrate when students meet certain milestones that suggest they're on that journey, whether it be transfer or just to complete associate's degree or even a certificate. Like, how do we celebrate, find ways to know when a student is completed 30 units, you're halfway there, right? Let's celebrate them. And then figuring out ways to move the supportive services, not only in the class, in the counseling space, but in the classroom. Is there ways that we can do that and beyond to make students feel like they can be, that we support them and want them to be successful? So this most recent report, where students are from the student focus groups and some other work that was done, can be found here. And again, you have access to the slides, but if you go to the rpgroup.org, you can download this report. They also have a super brief that comes out weekly, and it's just an email that you can sign up for that lets you know about new reports, conferences, affinity groups for folks in the community college to learn more and build community. There's also a listserv where people pose questions. Who's done a climate survey? Can someone send it to me? Or who, we have a new metrics we have to monitor. Who's had success in figuring that out? So it is definitely a resource. So if you go to rpgroup.org, you can find out more about the work that the RP group is doing. Here's some of the full set or complement of reports that are available on the study. And then we can, for your consideration, there's just the shared reports. There's some data on specific to the college, and again, I provide additional slides that I didn't go over just for time's sake, but they're available to you. And then we'll send you the summary of the Padlet, the feedback received through the Padlet. So that's it. Any final questions or thoughts?
I just had one question, like with all this research and these findings that you're putting together, what has the Peralta College Community Systems, like, what are they doing? Like now that you have come to these conclusions, like what are the next steps that, the institution wants to take further?
Well, part of it is inviting us to do presentations like this. So a lot of this research is just, the survey work is just like wrapped up. So a lot of times what the RP group will do, and it really depends on funding. And I think the funding for this is ending. But what we like to do is go out and do sessions where we provide professional development. So we might invite college teams to come, and this is what we did with with the 6 success factors. We had teams come out from various colleges, and we did a day-long session where they drilled into their own data and they developed plans based on the research. RP Group loves to do that. I think in the case of this study, there's not the funding yet to do that, but hopefully we can find the funding that would allow us to come out and do more of that one-on-one individualized work with campuses. Yeah.
Hi, thank you. I was watching on Zoom, so I rushed here to hear the end. Thank you so much. So my question is, and I apologize if I missed this in the transition, is there opportunity, or have you guys worked with the students themselves and have beyond the focus groups, have them actually create modules for what it would look like for them to have safe space or model dialogue or classroom facilitation.
That sounds great, but we haven't had the opportunity to do that beyond summarizing what they shared with us. Yeah, I would love that. I'm like thinking, gosh, how can I? Dr. Darla Cooper is executive director. I want to talk to her about like how can we do that, Darla? Yes. So thank you for the. So one more comment, and I think then we'll be at time. Any other feedback or comments for us? No, I'm standing between you and lunch, right? Or no, the next speaker. Yeah. All right. Thank you all so much for having me.
Thank you so much to our amazing keynote presenters. We really appreciate that thoughtful presentation. We learned so much.